Have you ever watched someone push away the very person who loved them most? Not because they didn't care, but because their pride wouldn't let them show it. I see it all the time. He thinks he's in control. That silence is strength. That needing someone is weakness. So, he chooses ego. He chooses distance. He chooses to protect himself rather than connect. But here's the truth: ego may protect you today, but it will cost you everything tomorrow. And by the time regret shows up, it's already too late. He walked away thinking he had the upper hand. Maybe he said less during the argument. Maybe he acted unbothered when she expressed her needs. Maybe he stayed cool, calm, and detached, convinced that the one who cares less has the power. That's what ego tells Yog, that silence is strength, that needing someone makes you weak, and that vulnerability is a liability. So he chose to be silent when she needed reassurance. He pulled back when she leaned in. He withheld love and called it standards. He believed showing emotion made him look desperate or less desirable. And in that moment, ego gave him a false sense of power. But ego's power is shallow. It's loud in the short term and hollow in the long term. It feels like control, the weight of your absence, but what you're really doing is avoiding closeness. And here's the painful truth. You can't feel close to someone while simultaneously trying to prove you don't need them. He thought he was winning. He thought keeping her at a distance gave him leverage. What he didn't realize was that intimacy only grows through the exact things ego tells you to avoid: empathy, effort, and emotional openness. Ego is performative. It's based on how things look, not how things feel. He was more concerned with appearing strong than being loving, more focused on looking in control than actually creating a safe space for connection. The trouble is, when someone chooses ego, they don't feel the cost immediately. In the moment, they feel powerful. But power without intimacy is a lonely kind of victory, because you might be standing tall, but you're standing alone. Eventually, the silence stops feeling powerful. It just feels empty. The lack of vulnerability, the emotional withholding, the dismissiveness. It doesn't create strength, it creates distance. And distance is where love quietly dies. She stopped fighting for closeness because every time she tried, she was met with a wall. Eventually, she stopped knocking. She stopped asking him to open up. And that's when regret walks in. You don't get to keep love by acting like you don't care. You don't build trust by being too proud to show pain. He thought she'd always be there, that he could keep choosing ego, and she would keep choosing him. But love needs nourishment. It needs honesty. It needs presence. Ego starves a relationship of those things. And when you starve something long enough, it dies. He told himself he was being strong, that he was setting boundaries, that he was protecting himself. But deep down, he was scared. Scared of being seen. Scared of being hurt. And rather than confront that fear, he masked it with control. But love doesn't thrive in control. It thrives in connection. He mistook her emotional openness for weakness. He saw her vulnerability as too much. But it wasn't too much. It was a chance to meet her halfway, a chance to build something real. Now that chance is gone. And in the space where she used to be, there's only silence. And not the strong, self-assured kind, the heavy kind, the kind that reminds you every day of what you lost because you couldn't go of your ego long enough to show up. That's when he realizes the power he thought he had wasn't power at all. It was fear dressed up as pride, and what he thought was control was actually the beginning of regret. He thought strength being the one who never flinched, the one who didn't show emotion, the one who could keep his feelings locked up and never let anyone see the cracks. That's what he was taught, directly or indirectly. That real men don't show weakness, and vulnerability is weakness. So he kept his guard up. He stayed composed, aloof, emotionally distant, not because he didn't feel, but because he didn't want to risk being seen in a way that made him feel exposed. But what he didn't understand is that real strength, the kind that builds relationships, the kind that creates deep connection, doesn't come from pretending you don't care. It comes from letting someone in, from being honest about what scares you, what moves you, what hurts. The kind of strength that relationships require is not about how much you can suppress. It's about how much you're willing to express, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when your pride is screaming at you to shut down or stay quiet. He wore emotional armor because he thought it made him resilient, but it only made him unreachable. He confused detachment with independence, silence with emotional control. And when she reached out, when she opened up, when she tried to connect, he backed away. He didn't want to look like he cared too much. He didn't want to lose that imagined power he thought he had by being less invested. So instead of leaning in, he stepped back. Instead of reassuring her, he dismissed her. Instead of showing affection, he stayed cold, thinking that was what it meant to stay in control. What he didn't see was that she wasn't asking him to be perfect. She wasn't asking him to fall apart. She just wanted to know there was a human behind the wall he'd built. Someone who could say, "This matters to me too." But to do that, he would have had to show a part of himself he wasn't ready to reveal. Not because he didn't feel it, but because feeling it and showing it are two very different things when your self-worth is tangled up in pride. And slowly, without even realizing it, he began to lose her. Not because he didn't love her, but because he didn't let her feel love. She felt alone in the relationship, like she was the only one trying, the only one giving. And eventually, that emotional imbalance becomes too heavy for one person to carry. It's easy to believe that the person who shows less has the upper hand. That withholding affection, being chill, acting indifferent makes you more desirable. But that belief is a lie sold by ego and insecurity. Because while it might keep you safe in the short term, it will starve the connection in the long term. No one wants to feel like they're begging for love or fighting for scraps of affection. She didn't want dominance. She wanted depth. She didn't need control. She needed closeness. And when he couldn't offer that, she walked away not because she stopped caring, but because she stopped feeling cared for. Now he sits with the realization that silence doesn't protect your heart. It isolates it. That staying guarded doesn't keep love in, it pushes it out. And the man who thought he was strong because he didn't need anyone is now learning what it feels like to truly be alone. Not the kind of alone you choose, but the kind that happens when someone who just wanted to be let in finally gives up trying. Because in the end, strength isn't about how much you can suppress. It's about how brave you are to let someone see the real you. Messy, uncertain, imperfect, but real. And that's the one thing he never let her see. Regret doesn't come crashing in like a storm. It doesn't show up with loud alarms and flashing signs. It's quiet. It slips in slowly, subtly, so subtly that at first, he doesn't even recognize it. Right after the breakup, he still thinks he made the right decision. He tells himself he had to protect his peace, that she was too emotional, too demanding, that it was better this way. His friends nod. His ego feels reassured. He scrolls through life like nothing happened. He might even feel a sense of relief. But that's the thing about regret. It doesn't hit right away. It waits until the noise dies down, until the distractions wear off, until he's finally left alone with his own thoughts. At first, it's just a passing thought. Something reminds him of her. A song, a scent, the way someone phrases a sentence. He shakes it off. Tells himself not to overthink, but then it happens again. He scrolls past an old photo or stumbles across a message thread they never finished. And suddenly it's not just a thought, it's a feeling, a pit in his stomach, a pang in his chest. That's when regret begins to unfold. It starts with the realization of what he took for granted. The way she listened when no one else did. How she picked up on his moods before he even said a word. The way she tried, over and over, to reach him emotionally, even when he gave her nothing back. He remembers the times she asked him what was wrong, and he brushed her off, told her he was fine. The moments she craved connection and he stayed silent. He remembers how she cried that one night. Not because she was weak, but because she cared so much and didn't know how to reach him anymore. But in those moments, his ego convinced him he was doing the right thing by staying detached. That being stoic was mature. That not reacting meant he was in control. He confused her emotional honesty with instability. And now, in hindsight, he sees that her vulnerability wasn't a problem. It was a gift, one he didn't know how to receive, one he rejected over and over until she had nothing left to give. Regret settles in fully when he realizes she's not coming back. That the door he never imagined would close is now locked. Not out of bitterness, but self-respect. She gave all she could, and now someone else will benefit from the emotional space she once held for him. That's when it hurts the most. Not when she left, but when he understands why she had to. There's a weight that comes with knowing you were loved well and didn't rise to meet it. The knowing you had something rare and let it slip through your hands because you were too busy trying to prove you didn't need it. Regret isn't loud because it doesn't need to be. It speaks in moments of stillness, in the middle of the night, in the silence after a conversation ends too soon, in the empty spaces where her presence used to be. He may never say it out loud. He may still put on the front, still act unbothered. But inside he knows. He knows that the love he lost didn't disappear overnight. It slowly unraveled every time he chose distance over closeness, ego over empathy, silence over truth. And now, he has all the space he thought he wanted, and none of the connection he thought he could keep without effort. That's what regret really is. The echo of everything you didn't say, everything you didn't do, and everything you realized too late you actually wanted. Winning the argument felt good. For a moment, he said what he needed to say, shut her down with logic, kept his composure, didn't raise his voice. Maybe she cried, maybe she walked away frustrated, but he felt like he'd made his point, that he'd stood his ground, that he'd won. But in relationships, winning an argument often means losing the connection. Because when your goal is to win, not to understand, you're playing against your partner, not with them. She didn't come to him for a debate. She came to be heard, to be understood, to feel like she mattered enough for him to listen without defensiveness. But he was too busy protecting his pride to notice that what she really wanted was reassurance. And while he focused on crafting the perfect comeback, she was drifting further away emotionally, feeling less safe, less loved, less seen. There's a moment in every conflict where you can choose between proving your point or preserving the relationship. And he kept choosing his point. Every time she opened up about something that hurt her, he made it about how she was wrong to feel that way. He dissected her words instead of addressing her emotions. He used logic like a weapon, not a bridge. And the more he won, the more she felt like she was losing him. Arguments aren't inherently bad. In fact, they can bring people closer when handled with care. But when ego takes the wheel, arguments turn into battles. And in a battle, someone has to lose. He didn't realize that every time he won, he was teaching her that being honest with him was unsafe, that expressing her needs would be met with resistance instead of compassion. He was so focused on being right that he missed the bigger true thing. No one feels close to the person who constantly invalidates them. He thought dominance equaled strength, that keeping emotional control made him the more stable one. But control without empathy is cold. She wasn't looking for control. She was looking for connection. And the more he dismissed her, the more she stopped trying. She started talking less, started sharing less. Not because she didn't care, but because she learned that her feelings were unwelcome in the space between them. And that's how love starts to die. Not in one big moment, but in 1,000 small dismissals. He may have walked away from those conversations feeling powerful, feeling like the reasonable one, the calm one. But what he didn't realize is that each win chipped away at the emotional safety she needed to stay. Being right became more important than being close. And slowly, silently, she stopped feeling like his partner. She started feeling like his opponent. One day, she stopped arguing altogether. Not because everything was fine, but because she had given up. She stopped explaining herself, stopped fighting for the relationship. And that's when the silence stopped feeling victorious. It started feeling empty. That's when he realized that proving your point doesn't hold you at night. That being right doesn't make you feel loved. That logic means nothing when it comes at the cost of someone's heart. It's a painful lesson to learning. You can win the argument and still lose the person. Because people don't remember every word you said. They remember how you made them feel. And if all they ever felt around you was wrong, misunderstood, or dismissed, eventually they stop showing up at all. And by the time he understood that, the damage was already done. She wasn't angry anymore. She was gone. She didn't walk away because he was flawed. She didn't leave because he had insecurities or made mistakes. She knew he wasn't perfect. No one is. What she could handle imperfections. What she couldn't handle was his refusal to grow. The resistance every time she brought something up. The defensiveness, the shutdowns, the way he would twist the conversation back onto her to avoid taking responsibility. It wasn't the flaws that broke them. It was the unwillingness to work through them. She gave him space to be real, to be human. She didn't expect him to have all the answers. She just wanted effort. She wanted to feel like he cared enough about the relationship to evolve with her, to improve communication, to face discomfort instead of avoiding it. But he didn't see the value in that. He saw her feedback as criticism, her vulnerability as pressure. Every time she expressed a need, he heard it as an attack. And instead of leaning in, he backed away. Growth is uncomfortable, and he wanted comfort. He wanted things to stay easy, undemanding, familiar. But love doesn't stay alive in autopilot. It asks things of us. It calls us to show up better. Not perfect, just better. It requires self-awareness, accountability, and the humility to say, "You're right, I need to work on that." And that's what he wouldn't do. He thought she would just keep adjusting, keep tolerating, keep loving him through everything while he stayed exactly the same. But people get tired, especially people who love deeply. They pour in until they're empty, hoping their partner will meet them halfway. And when that never happens, it becomes a quiet kind of heartbreak. The kind where you're still physically together, but emotionally alone. That's what she felt. Alone in her hope, alone in her effort, alone in her desire to grow something meaningful together. He thought she was asking for too much, that she was too emotional, too intense, too always needing to talk about things. But all she was asking for was growth, not just for the relationship, but for him. Because when someone loves you, they want to see you evolve into your best self. She believed in his potential. She saw who he could be if he let go of his ego, if he got curious about his patterns instead of defensive, if he chose honesty over comfort. But instead, he stayed still. He kept choosing the same reactions, the same avoidance, the same excuses. And when she finally left, he told himself she just couldn't accept him for who he was, that she didn't love him unconditionally. But love isn't about accepting someone's refusal to grow. It's about growing together. She wasn't asking him to be someone else. She was asking him to become more of who he already was, beneath the fear and pride and resistance. Now, with distance, he sees it. The conversations he shut down, the apologies he never gave, the chances she handed him again and again to rise, to show that he cared enough to try. But he didn't take them because he assumed she would always be there. He thought love was enough, but love without growth is stagnant, and stagnant love turns into resentment. He's left with the realization that she wasn't too much. She just wanted more than he was willing to give. Not in money or status or romance, in presence, in maturity, in emotional partnership. She wanted someone who was willing to face their own reflection and say, "I can do better." And that's something he wasn't ready for. Until now, when it's too late to give it to her. Love doesn't thrive where ego leads. It can't. Because love is about giving, about understanding, about showing up for someone even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. Ego, on the other hand, is about protecting yourself. It's about control, pride, and the illusion of power. He didn't realize it at the time, but every time he chose to protect his pride instead of the relationship, he was slowly pushing her away. She wanted a partner, not a competitor. She didn't need someone perfect. She needed someone present, but he let her go sit at the head of the table. He valued being right more than being close. He thought love should come without having to bend, without having to reflect, without having to meet her halfway. Every time she came to him with a concern, his ego told him she was nagging. When she asked for reassurance, his ego said she was too needy. When she expressed hurt, ego told him to minimize it, to shut her down, to act like it wasn't a big deal. He mistook detachment for strength. Thought withholding affection gave him the upper hand, but all it did was create distance. And love doesn't survive in distance. It needs warmth, vulnerability, effort. But ego has no interest in that. Ego is about self-preservation. And to preserve itself, ego often sacrifices what matters most. So while she kept trying, bringing up issues gently, making space for his feelings, hoping he'd open up, he stayed guarded. He kept choosing pride over connection. The saddest part is that he probably thought he was doing everything right. He thought being calm during conflict was enough, that not yelling made him emotionally mature, that giving her space instead of engaging meant he was respectful. But silence isn't always kindness. Avoidance isn't always emotional intelligence. Sometimes it's just fear hiding behind the mask of stoicism. And she felt that deeply. She didn't leave because she didn't love him. She left because she felt alone. Because every time she needed him to step up emotionally, ego stepped in instead. He couldn't, or wouldn't, show her he cared in the ways that mattered. Not because he didn't have the capacity, but because he kept letting ego convince him he didn't have to. And so love, tired and unheard, quietly began to leave the room. When love finally left, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like it had been silenced too many times. And in that silence, ego had no one left to argue with, no one to prove wrong. Just him, in the echo everything she used to bring into his life. Light, support, connection. Now, regret fills the spaces she once occupied. He starts to remember the little things. The way she used to look at him when he opened up. The way her voice softened when she felt seen. The way she always gave him one more chance to meet her where she stood. But those chances are gone, not out of cruelty, but self-respect. She couldn't keep loving someone who wouldn't show up. Someone who couldn't set ego aside long enough to say, "I hear you. I care. I'll try." Now he sees the truth. You can't keep love if you keep hiding behind pride. You can't expect someone to stay when your ego is the only one being protected. Love leaves when it stops feeling safe, and ego doesn't create safety. It creates walls. And by the time he realized that, love had already walked out the door, and regret had taken its place. Ego always promises protection, control, power. But what it never tells you is the cost. It doesn't tell you that by protecting yourself from vulnerability, you also shut yourself off from connection. That in choosing not to feel, you lose the one person who made you feel something real. That by trying so hard not to get hurt, you end up hurting the very person who would have stood by you if you just let her in. He thought silence was strength. He thought love would wait. But love doesn't wait forever, especially not for someone who refuses to grow, refuses to listen, refuses to show up. So now, he lives with the thing he never thought would come for him in regret. Because regret doesn't care about pride. It doesn't care how calm you looked or how right you were. Regret only cares about what you didn't do when you had the chance, and who you lost because of it. And when ego finally leaves the room, regret is the only thing left standing.